This is an old DOS game called High Command. It's based in the European theater, World War II. Basically, you can play from 1939 through the end of the war. If you try to go for a stalemate, the latest I've let it play through 46 and then it kind of ends it automatically. Then gives you go out over victory conditions and score. Now, what's interesting to me is this is an old game. Slow game. Very much a computerized version of an old Avion Hill game where you have the intricate troop movements, and it is very elaborate. There are worse games I've played. There are far worse games. I did spend 8 hours programming the fighter movements in one video game. Yeah, that was a mistake on my part anyway, but that's another story. With High Command, it is designed as a strategic level, moving your units, planning out all these things, and it can take, depending on a whole host of variables, it's not uncommon for it to go to 45 minutes to go an entire turn. Or longer, really. An hour is not uncommon, not impossible. So, why would you play a game like this? Some people just don't have time or interest to play that kind of game, and I fully understand that. But there are people who do, and by and large, they're not kids. What's interesting is the younger kids growing up, and I blame cell phones, video games in general, all the stuff that is designed and caters to a short attention span basically teaches people not to have an attention span. They never have to develop it, they never have to learn it, therefore they don't have an attention span. If it's not instant gratification, reward for my actions, they don't want to play it. Game stores that I used to play in, I would show the kids the benefits of having a strategy, planning ahead. The most powerful piece doesn't guarantee victory, and I'd play these games. They'd see these awesome power pieces that I would have in my collection, and I'd let them play it. Some of them would dream of playing some of these pieces. Oh, if I had that piece, I'd just play it all the time. You want to play it? Oh, sure. And then I'd annihilate them with it. And I would show them that the power piece doesn't guarantee you a win. That the most powerful thing on the board often becomes a liability. It's strategy, it's tactics, thinking outside the box. How do you do this? And I was really saddened with some of those kids growing up, and they just became these power players, wanted to just take the most powerful piece, and one person boasted of his brilliant strategy. He just had a high-end computer that could handle it, and he would play Command and Conquer and whatever other video games there were at real-time strategy, just basically build a sheer mass swarm, throw it at the enemy, lag their system out because their graphics weren't able to handle 500 and some odd units, and while they were lagged out, he'd wipe them out and win. That was what he did. That's not a strategy. That's at best horde tactics, and it's a poor application therein, really. So the kids are not learning to pay attention to play these types of games. But why would anyone want to pay attention to learn to play these kind of games? That's more what this is about. I always point out in the planning, analyzing, coming up with this strategy that you have to plan out turns in advance to plan out what you're going to build things in production here so you have them in the next turn so you can attack with them the turn after that, or however the time frame of the game is. You're able to plan ahead and analyze, and you're able to get these really awesome victories. And it's far more rewarding when you accomplish that. You outthought your opponent. Aha! You didn't see this trap coming. Aha! And it's fun. It's exhilarating to be able to do that. What's interesting is these types of games, not all, but people who play these types of games, just like classic Battletech, by and large are either computer programmers, engineers, people who are interested in the nuts and bolts and planning and analyzing. And one person actually told me it helps him in his job to be playing these games and analyzing and learning some of the stuff because it helps keep his mind sharp in that area. But that is a general thought on these slower tactical games. In playing High Command for the first time in, oh goodness, I don't remember when it came out. I remember it was in the days of DOS and Windows 3.1, but I want to say I hadn't played this game in at least 25 years. It was back in the early days of college last time I remember regularly playing it. And it took me a while to remember how. It does have scenario sections in it that show you how to play this and walk you through some of the steps, but not having the actual manual was a bit of a challenge. But each turn is 1 month. It starts off with your deployment stage, where it shows you your new units. Then it has a section where you can combine these different units because they're combat strengths and abilities. A unit of, say, combat strength 2 and a unit of combat strength 4, you can combine them into a combat strength 6 if they're the same type of unit: infantry, mechanized, tanks, etc. So you have all these different types of units. It would also let you redeploy them, and you can move them around. I have found doing that uses up your resources that you use in actual building new units, so I try to minimize that. Just air units, I shuffle those around. Those are free. In the resource allocation phase, this is where, and some of this you can actually tell the computer to do for you, the High Command. You delegate it to the High Command. And what's funny with that is that you can have them build all your units, but you're kind of gambling that they're going to build what you want. So I usually just had them allocate the resources around, and it will transfer all the minerals and oil and all this different stuff from all your different mines that you have captured in your territories. And yes, it gets that intricate. You can shift those to the factories, and then you can actually produce the different types of units, whether it be infantry, mechanized, tank, fighters, fighter bombers, all those different types of ships, paratroopers, the list goes on. I mean, it's very intricate. Once you have all those set, keep in mind that some units will take a month to build, other units might take several months, and it will take time. So you produce all these different units and resources. Then it goes to your first air phase. You have your air units either do aerial combat patrols, bombing raids, strike, attack against ships, factories, ground units, etc. Both sides will plan their turns at the same time, and then it will run both sides' air units at the same time. So you might do this massive airstrike of all your forces, and then just so happen they put a heavy air defense in that same area, anticipating that, and you take all these casualties. And you can actually basically hot seat, where two players will take turns programming their turns back and forth. I don't think they had any kind of web or planning where you could play against another player. As far as I know, that's not possible. And the computer, when it's planning out its turns, of course, AI, which are really just decision trees, are very challenging to program in. And me being me, I figured out how it thought and used that against it. But that's a whole other story. Once it does the air phase, then you do a naval phase. And this is where you can do your combat patrols, your amphibious assaults, all these different things. And then it will do your ground units. Your ground units move around. Then it has a second air phase, then a second naval phase. So if you launched an amphibious assault, landed troops, then moved them into attack, the opponent could then do an air attack against either your ships or your ground forces, and then you use your last naval phase to try to retreat your navy back out. So it's pretty well planned out. It's not like you can totally, dominate with any one thing. One thing really cool with it is it does also calculate supply. You have to own territory and keep your lines of supply open. So if you just charge one unit off into behind enemy lines, we'll run out of supply and just sit there, and then it's either not able to move much, and then it loses its combat strength. Each unit is factored in for its organization If a unit's sitting there at 30% organization, it's not going to fare as well in combat. But I have found a great way to really dominate and mess things up for Russia if you're playing Germany and invading the Russian is take Leningrad by amphibious assaults on your first action. Don't declare war. Let the act of invasion be your actual declaration of war. Gives you a little bit of an edge. Wreaks havoc with their supply lines. There are a couple little bugs and quirks with it. One time I was playing a game and my Italian Navy disappeared. It took me a while to figure out where it went, and in a hexagon off in the Sahara Desert. I don't know how they did that. Some kind of mighty tsunami. I played just about every scenario possible. I'm almost always playing Germany because the Allies are actually kind of boring. You're sitting there just with nothing to do until somebody's invaded and it goes to war, and then it's, oh, I get to move now, okay. Of course, there's things that you can do in a game that would never happen in real life. I have successfully invaded England. I have set up an Atlantic wall of sorts and just played an endurance game and just made England make several attempts at amphibious assaults and fail and give up. I've played several games where I conquered Russia. The AI basically goes on the template of the major events in World War II as a guideline for when it will attack, when it will invade, when it will do. On a actual tactical level, its planning is basically if it sees one of your units and it has 2 units, assuming they're strong enough, it will have those 2 units move in and attack that one. Now, since all movement's simultaneous, if you have infantry unit, for example, German infantry can move 4, 2 spaces back, 2 spaces forward. And on that 4th movement point where it lands there, have a bunch of other units converge on that spot. They move up to that one spot and sit there because there's nothing to fight, and then on the 4th movement phase comes in, massive attack, and you've got 5 units on there too. So you can do things like that and destroy it. Back in the day, I was really a code breaker. I would always figure out how the AI thought. Back in the days before you could actually have memory cards and permanent memory recording, video games would have these codes you'd have to type in, and it would tell what was going on at different stages. This is old Sega system, the Jurassic Park video game I remember specifically. I broke the code. I figured out what the code was, and I could actually give myself more ammunition, more equipment, more things, and I could, by editing that code, because you got to put it in there, and you have an 18-digit, for example. I forget how much that one actually had. It had, I want to say it was 18 digits, but I could be wrong. And I had elaborate maps and notes on all the different codes and stuff. I was cleaning out some files a few years ago, came across, oh wow, I still have this. I threw it out because it was pointless. But I figured out all those codes, and I could change that and give myself more ammunition, more equipment. And I did that in several games. It's kind of funny. In retrospect, I'm really surprised I didn't go into some areas using that in some way, because I did a lot of stuff like that. At any rate, I thought you guys might find this interesting. I did heavily edit this video of what you're watching because I wasn't going to let you sit there and just stare at 20 minutes of resource allocations and troop deployments and planning out my air assault phase. I thought you'd just find the actual movements more interesting. Oh, and if you're curious, Classic Reloaded and I have no agreement. They've not done anything for me. It's free-to-play website. I don't get a kickback or anything. It's just some information I thought I'd pass along on some fun old games. At any rate, game on.